the countries from our region. Welcome.
Thanks, Jean. Hello, welcome after the lunch. I hope you enjoy it. While we are waiting for my presentation to load up, I will say a few words about me. My name is Mikhail Asenov, and I dedicated entire my professional career on waste management and EPR. I started like 20 years ago in the Bulgarian Ministry of Environment. It was around 2002. This was the time when Bulgaria was in the process of joining European Union. So we had to change our entire legislation so that it fits to European one. And basically, we were in a situation that most of the countries in the region are now. We developed the legislation and made the first steps for the implementation of the legislation. Then I quit the ministry and started working in the first producer responsibility organization in Bulgaria. I was responsible for project management for separate collection. So I joined the establishment of the first separate collection systems in Bulgaria. Then other waste streams were also become to be developed using and applying EPR scheme, EPR principle. Not only packaging, but also waste electric and electronic equipment, batteries, end-of-life vehicles. And I quit the PRO and start to consult establishment of such producer responsibility organizations. So I have experience on all kinds of streams, waste streams for that apply producer responsibility principle. At the same time, I also joined Austrian Environment Agency, their international department. I'm working on international projects, mainly on EPR. So I work in countries mainly on the western part of Asia initially, countries like Georgia, like Ukraine, Moldova. Then just recently, 3 years ago, due to the contracts with between the World Bank and Austrian Environment Agency, me and my colleague Francesca, she's also moderating the last panel session. We joined projects in the region, I mean in Asia Pacific regions, for the development of roadmaps for phasing out of plastic waste, but also integral part of these roadmaps is the extended producer responsibility. So we worked in several countries, in Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia. We also prepared the regional action plan on marine litter of ASEAN. So that's in short. My presentation will be focused mainly on the legal part. I'll try to present to you the EPR system from the legal point of view. What are the main requirements of the legislation, EPR legislation? What are the requirements on European level, legal requirements, so beyond national level, because in Europe we have two levels of legislation. First one is European one, Second one is the legal system of each member state of European Union. I also will say how different member states, how they apply EPR in their legal systems, the main approaches used to implement the EPR. I also mention how the waste management legislation and the EPR legislation fit in the overall European policy, because it's important. It's important in terms of interrelationship between the waste management legislation and other policies. Without such interrelation, none of the policy will be successful, EPR or the other policies. I'll say a few words how they fit together. Also, I will present a little bit about the history of the waste management in Europe, and especially how EPR appeared, what were the conditions needed and during that time, during the appearance of the EPR. And we'll explore whether such conditions are present currently in the region. Then I will present the main directives that implement EPR system in Europe. And finally, I'll present to you the main elements of an EPR system. We'll compare these elements with the situation in the Pacific and Asia Pacific region. And I'll present the approaches, how different member states implemented EPR in their legal system. What are the advantages of the approach? What are the disadvantages? So you are in the process of designing and implementing for the first time EPR. And I hope this will be interesting and to be able to distinguish different approaches and to take the right decision depending on the conditions in your country. I'll start with presenting waste management policy, how it fits to the overall European policy. Recent 10 years, European policy is dominated, European economic policy is dominated by the so-called Green Deal. Green Deal is a set of policies in climate, in energy, in transport, in taxation, so that Europe transforms into resource efficient and competitive economy. You can see the three main goals of the Green Deal. Our goal is to reduce the net greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. Next one is Europe to become no net emission continent by 2050. And all this should happen by decoupling from resource use. So in order to achieve these very ambitious goals, we need to change our strategies. And as you may guess, while transforming EU in such a green transition, waste management is a very important part. And it is integrated in these 6 main strategies. First one is the Circular Economy Action Plan. We heard about circular economy in the morning session, and also you know the concept So we have to stop the leakage of the waste, to keep the waste into the economy, to stop the emission, to stop the energy losses. So the materials will go into circle from the products to the waste and back again and again. And as Wayne said, this is probably not technically possible because it contradicts the laws of thermodynamics. So waste management is integrated in these strategies. For how? For example, the chemical strategy. The products contain hazardous materials, but not only products contain hazardous materials, waste also contain hazardous materials. And when we brought the waste back into the economy, back into the production of products, we again have problem with the hazardous materials. So waste management should be in the chemical strategy. The same applies for industrial strategy, for textile strategy. I won't go into details. But also the vice versa is also valid. We cannot have successful waste management system without integrating waste management into other policies. For example, just a second. Yeah, we cannot have successful waste management without changing our taxes, without changing the prioritization of funding of projects. So we should prefer projects that apply circular economy approaches. So all these strategies that are part of the Green Deal, they influence waste management. Because as I said in the beginning, everything it is interrelated. We cannot skip one strategy and expect good results. Next slides presents the European legislation. You see all European directives on this slide. You may notice that there are three types of directives. The first one is the so-called horizontal legislation. This horizontal legislation applies for all waste streams and all operations and activities with the waste streams. The most important one is the Waste Framework Directive, where the main principles of the European legislation on waste management are provided. I'll present to you in more details this directive because it contains the very important EPR provisions. Without such provisions, the EPR system will not exist and will not be implemented on the right way. Second group of legal documents is the so-called regulations on waste treatment operations. Here we have rules, special rules, how to incinerate the waste, how to landfill the waste, how to establish, construct, operate landfills so that do not pose risks to the environment. And also we have rules on how to sort waste and how to recycle waste with the adoption of standards. And the third group, which is the most interesting group for us, is the waste streams. So these are the directives that regulate waste streams, different waste streams. You can see that we have legislation on waste oil, on sludge from wastewater treatment plants, batteries, packaging, single-use plastics. This is the newest directive on single-use plastics. Polychlorinated biphenyls. These are hazardous materials contained in oil. We are phasing them out. We have a directive on this. Also, end-of-life vehicles, electronic equipment. You can read it. So these directives that are marked in black, they apply EPR principle. So EPR principle applies on oils, batteries, packaging, single-use plastics, end-of-life vehicles, and electronics. There are also waste streams that are marked here in blue, textile and waste tires. We do not have dedicated directives on these waste streams, but many countries in European Union, they apply EPR principle also for textiles and waste tires. You can see bio-waste. Currently, bio-waste is not under the EPR principle. There is a discussion whether it's possible to be under EPR principle. Me personally believe that it's possible, but currently it's responsibility of municipalities, not producers, but taxpayers and municipalities finance bio-waste. And construction and demolition waste, it applies very similar to EPR principle. Producers are not responsible, but the investors in construction projects, they are responsible in many countries because we do not have common European legislation on construction and demolition waste. But many countries choose this principle. Investors are responsible. I'd like to say how all these directives were developed in time, because it's important to know the situation, why there were changes, what were the preconditions for such changes, and everybody to check its country where it belongs in this chart. So you can see that in the beginning, the waste collection in Europe, it was just focused on collecting of mixed waste, just to get the waste out of the town as far as possible. I am speaking about the time before 1975. Even the waste treatment facilities were not so sophisticated. It was landfilling, but not landfilling like now, without so complex rules for construction and operation of the landfills. Also, there were some separate collection, but this separate collection was focused only on profitable waste. Profitable waste means that the payments that the recycling facility pays to the collector covers all the costs for collection and recycling. So these are, for example, metals, some types of paper, not all types of paper, some types of plastic. So we don't need any additional financing to collect this waste. We don't need EPR for this. Then, due to the pressure from the society, the system moved up, and new rules, more complex rules for landfilling were needed. More bigger landfills were needed because in order to implement complex requirements, you need economy of scale. So we need bigger landfills. And this was not in the power of single municipality to establish such landfill. So we needed regional cooperation between municipalities. So for the first step, everything happens on the level of municipality. Then the waste management is going up, and we need cooperation between municipalities. So we need regional level. The next step is when the society realized that even the best landfill is not enough to solve all environmental problems. So we need to address the problem of avoiding landfilling. We have to find a solution how to avoid landfilling. And obviously, the recycling was such solution. But the problem with recycling is that it's a private business. We cannot construct a plant financed by the government and expect it to work, because when we recycle something, we are using recycled material for new product, for new raw material. And this is a private business. The government cannot solve it. So the problem how to involve the private sector arised. And here EPR provided a solution. If we oblige producers to cover the costs, they will take care about the waste. They will finance also the waste management. They will finance separate collection and recycling. And they will find market for the recycled product, and they will bring it back into the new product. And EPR offers this solution in a most fair way. Saying this, I mean that it saves costs, because when we incorporate the waste management costs into the product price, usually the products are in competition. This is the most desirable situation, when we have perfect competition between the products. Waste management costs are in the price, so they are kept to the lowest level. Otherwise, the competition will kick out the company out of the market. And the other reason to be fair, this principle, is because it shifts the burden from the taxpayers to the producers and to the consumers. Because producers and consumers, they are polluters. They have to pay the costs. And it's fair because who consumes more pays more, because he buys products, and the costs are in the price of the product. The alternative tax system, it cannot ensure such fairness, because usually the taxation, it's made to be simple. It cannot differentiate between different types of products, different types of plastics. But the story doesn't end here. We continue. EPR could be established on a national level, because national level, the government controls the market on the national scale, while we still have problems with the pollution, even with recycling. So we have to make the next step, circular economy. We have to address the problem in its core. We have to address the products, how they are produced, whether they incorporate recycled materials, whether they are designed to be longer, to be reused, to be well maintained. This could be solved with circular economy approaches, but they work on global level, not national level, because the products, they travel freely nowadays. There is a competition between countries. If one country establishes strict rules and decreases the prices, then the other country that do not apply such strict rules will be in better condition, in better competitive condition. So we need global solution for this one. And now is the time, because the markets are global. Before, it was not possible. And EPR could also help in this process. How? Recently in Europe, we introduced the so-called eco-modulated fees. It is required that PROs, Producer Responsibility Organization, should establish a fees, lower fees for products that are green and higher fees for products that are non-green. Then we'll have market advantages for products that incorporate more recycled material, that are designed to be used longer, to be reused. So everybody of you could decide where in this graph your country is located, depending on the conditions. I said to you that EPR could save costs because it internalizes the costs into the price of the products, and the costs are kept to the minimum. But by keeping the cost to the minimum, will the quality of the services deteriorate? Yes, possibly. Because if everybody wants its product to be cheaper, and the waste management costs are in the price, then the company could decide that they will reduce the costs by reducing the quality. So we need governments to take care of this problem, take care about the quality of the services. That's why we have the Waste Framework Directive that puts a pressure on the producers to achieve a certain desired outcomes when they establish the waste collection systems. So you can see the Waste Framework Directive defines this pyramid, the famous upside down pyramid, which means the most of the quantity of the waste generated should be prevented. For this purpose, we have policies. For example, for the food waste, we have, or we will have, because it's under discussion, the prevention targets. By this year, the food waste generation should be reduced this far. Next in the hierarchy is the recycling and reuse. In these directives that I presented to you in the previous slide, not the previous, but before the previous, there are targets. Some directives contain only recycle targets, but some of the directive contain also reuse and recycling targets. So we address in Europe the problem with quality of the services with targets. Establish whatever your system you like, but this system should achieve these targets. And finally, we try to stop landfilling of waste, to change it with recycling, recovery, prevention, reuse. That's why we have instruments like landfill tax, which is an instrument that artificially increases the price of the landfilling as operation so that it is higher than the recycling costs. And the generators, waste producers, they will prefer recycling than landfilling. Other important requirements of the Waste Framework Directive, it's about establishment of integrated network of disposal facilities. So EU as a whole should be able to dispose its waste, and there should be enough landfills, incinerators, so that their capacity is enough to cover the whole amount of the waste. Why this is important? Also, I forgot about another requirement that every citizens in Europe should be served by a waste collector. So even the smallest settlement should have waste collection system for mixed residual waste. I'm not talking about separate collection waste, not yet. Why this is important? We need the basis on which to step so that we establish the separate collection. Just imagine a situation when there is no collection of waste at all in a settlement. And the producer decides to establish a collection for separate collection in this settlement. Then all the waste, mixed or segregated source, will go to one container because there is no other. And instead of collecting separately, this container, which is dedicated for recyclable waste, it will be filled with everything, with all kinds of waste. So that's why we need landfills, we need collection of mixed waste so that we are able to separate the waste in two types: residual mixed waste and recyclable waste. And here the problem of how to finance this appears. The framework directive requires the so-called cost recovery mechanism. So it means that the polluters have to pay for the waste. Otherwise, if we don't have such a system for cost covering, then we cannot provide the proper services. And there are many ways how to provide such funding. If we talk about the municipal waste, here in this case, who is the polluter? The polluter are the households. They generated the mixed waste. They have to pay, and usually they pay to the municipality, and the municipality organizes the waste collection in this area, in this municipality. There are other sources of funding like subsidizing from the national government, but I do not consider these sources a sustainable way of sourcing of funding for collection of waste. This is because the governments, they have other priorities Sometimes they cannot dedicate funds for waste collection to give subsidies to the municipalities because something more important appear, and this happens constantly. Waste management is unfortunately not of highest priorities for the governments. That's why municipalities need sustainable way of providing funding. Other requirements that are needed for establishing of EPR system is the identification of all waste collectors, all recycling companies, all sorting companies in the country. This is done by registration or by permitting of the companies. So first we have a list of companies. Second, we are sure that they are doing the recycling or disposal, whatever, in the right way. They receive a permit for this. Next thing that is needed, it's reporting system. Because as I told you, the quality is guaranteed, the quality of the services is guaranteed by targets, achieving of targets. So we need to track whether these targets are achieved. That's why we need information system that every generator of waste, every collector of waste, every recycler of waste, they report, and we know at certain point of time whether the targets are achieved or not achieved. I'll move to the next slide. EPR system initially was not obligatory. It was not mandatory. It was voluntary in Europe. But because it is very successful, the European Commission and the Parliament decided that we need a rules. That's why our Waste Framework Directive was changed and such rules were established. So in this slide, I'm presenting the main requirements that member states should fulfill when they establish an EPR system. First, I say that the Framework Directive does not require that producers take the whole responsibility. There is an option. Either they cover only the costs, so they contribute financially. This is the first option. Second option, to contribute financially and organize by themselves the collection and recycling. These are the two options. Unfortunately, I prefer the second one because the responsibility on producers is bigger and they are responsible for the whole cycle, not just pay to somebody else and forget. They have to be responsible for the whole cycle. Also, the Waste Framework Directive requires that producers take care about the eco-design, whether their products contain recycled material, whether they are designed for longer use. This should be specified in the EPR legislation by the member states. Also, I'd like to highlight to you these specific obligations of PROs. It's very important because in the morning there was a question whether the collection of recyclable waste will be done only in bigger cities or also will cover the smaller cities. European directive requires that if the producers are supplying a product in a region of a country, the same producer should organize separate collection of the products that are generated after using his products. Another important topic is that the framework directive requires producers to establish appropriate waste collection systems. You take care, have in mind the word appropriate. So it's definitive. It's just, it sounds like a wish. And that's why many countries defined what is appropriate. Like, for example, some countries define that the number of containers, the number of people served by one container should not be more than a certain number. So, for example, in Austria, there are so many containers that each household, almost each household, has its own container for separate collection. So you can imagine how many containers we need to establish a proper waste collection system. And some countries put this into the legislation. Unfortunately, this is not required on a European level. Also, I'd like to highlight to you these requirements here about transparency for achievement of the targets. It's self-explained. I will not go into details. About independent audits. So we track the targets, we track the achievement of the targets, but somebody has to verify that the reported data for waste collection, for recycling is actually true. These reports provided by producer responsibility are actually true. So we need independent auditing. Unfortunately, the framework directive says where relevant. So against kind of wish, but if we need to establish a proper waste management system, and some European countries did it, they established auditing requirements in the legislation and auditing system. Next, I like to show you the requirements about your ownership, because it's very important. PROs are required by the legislation to be owned only by producers or importers. So no recycling company is allowed to be main owner in PRO. Why? Because of the competition. You can imagine that there is a competition between PROs. They try to reduce the fees for the producers, but also, and the legislation tries to prevent them to make hidden agreements for the price. This is the so-called horizontal cartels we have to prevent. But there are also vertical cartels. When the PRO selects its waste collectors and recyclers and awards these services only to one company year after year, this is a vertical cartel, which increases the fees first and also decreases the quality. And if we allow that the PROs are owned by recycling companies, then we will have problems. Okay, moving to the next, I will present to you. This slide depicts the necessary elements for a PRO. You can see that producers, they pay to the PRO a certain amount of fee based on the quantity of products put on the market. Then the PRO selects municipalities or private collectors. These are the two alternatives, and pays for the services. This is the standard scheme. Also, PRO pays to the sorting facilities and recyclers. What you see in green here is that according to my experience, it's not well incorporated in the legislation of the countries in the region. So the auditing, I mentioned the auditing, it's not incorporated. So verification of what producer report, it's not well maintained. Also, registration of producers, information system for tracking the achievement of the waste, it's not well regulated into the legislation. I will start describing different approaches undertaken by European countries. So I mentioned to you that first of all, legislation requires that recycling targets are met. This is very important, and when we establish a system, we should take care about this. Second is that the collection systems are appropriate. They are convenient for the people. And the next one is about financial and organizational burden. I told you that EPR could ensure that the burden is transferred from the taxpayers to the producers. Our system should care about this. And the first and the last one is the optimal price service ratio. So I'll present to you three approaches undertaken by European countries, three different approaches. First one is competitive scheme versus non-competitive scheme, only one PRO. What are the takeaways here? Which is better, one PRO or many? You know that I told you that the prices of the waste management services will be kept lower if there is competition. But if there is a competition, the PROs will be afraid of establishing, for example, eco-modulated fees, because they might lose clients. They will go to the other PRO. Also, the quality of the services is at risk because the costs are in the price. This is not valid if we have only one PRO. However, if the government takes care that the competition rules are properly established, then the system with many PRO could become more advantageous because the responsibility is transferred to the government to take care about the level of the fees, the cost of the services, the quality of the services. Next one that you can see in this slide that many countries in Europe apply non-competitive schemes, and however, there are many countries that apply competitive schemes. Next one that I'd like to compare is collective scheme versus individual scheme. When the responsibility is on a single producer, the costs could be optimized. He can decide what kind of costs he could dedicate so that the targets are achieved and the product is designed properly. However, this system is not working well because we need economy of scale. Every one single producer is not able to cover the whole territory of the country. So that's why it's preferred. The other one is preferred. You can see the countries in Europe that apply this scheme. And finally, I'd like to present to you two alternative approaches: only financial responsibility of the PROs versus financial plus or organizational responsibility. Here, you can see that if PROs are responsible, producers are responsible only financially, the only options for them is to transfer money to the municipalities. But the competition there is no competition on a service level. PRO could choose only municipality and they have to work according to their costs. So in terms of price optimization, the system with financial responsibility plus organizational responsibility, it's the best one. And is this the last slide? No, it's one. You can ask which system is better. I compared not me, but I took this graph from a study, compared the collection rate, recycling rate in different countries versus the fees paid in PROs. Unfortunately, there is no definite answer because you can see, for example, Germany and the Netherlands. Germany applies competitive scheme, Netherlands apply non-competitive scheme, but the collection rate, recycling rates, and the fees, the level of fees, they are almost the same. So that's what I wanted to show you. Next speakers are representatives from India and Maldives. Please, I invite you to share your experience.
Yeah, first I would like to extend my sincere thanks to UNDP to provide me an opportunity to attend this workshop. Let me just... Yeah, our Prime Minister, our Honorable Prime Minister is more cautious about the environment pollution and circularity of waste management. And regarding this, they have made certain announcement. On the occasion of World Environment Day in 2018, they had made that beat plastic pollution. And on the Independence Day in 2021, our Honorable Prime Minister has made an announcement to strengthen our vision of plastic-free pollution in India and in our duty to completely stop the use of single-use plastic. And they had also made observation in the Independence Day in 2021 that country is also emphasizing on mission circular economy. And in February 2022, they had made an announcement in One Ocean Summit that India's commitment to eliminate single-use plastic. And in order to achieve the announcement and target set by our Honorable Prime Minister, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, under the aegis of Government of India, has already notified the single-use plastic ban in 2021, which is effective from the July 2022. Besides that, the plastic packaging waste comes under the EPR regulation. The plastic waste management rules was notified in 2016, which has the mandate of extended producer responsibility. But the detailed guidelines was notified in February 2022 only. As per the plastic waste management status, per capita plastic consumption in 2014-15 is the global average is 28 kg per ton. India is using 11. And the plastic waste management tool is provide the statutory framework for environmentally sound management of plastic waste in the country. And as per the data of 2020-21, the plastic waste generated in India is 34,69,780 tons. Plastic waste recycled 15,80,000 tons, and plastic waste co-processed 1,67,000. Other end of life uses uses are in road construction and waste to oil in pyrolysis plant and some other plants. The regulatory framework for management of plastic waste. In India, plastic waste is being managed under the Plastic Waste Management Rule 2016 and Solid Waste Management Rule 2016. The Plastic Waste Management Amendment Rules to ban the single-use plastic was notified in July 2022. Further, the detailed guidelines for extended producer responsibility was notified in February 2022. Plastic Waste Management Amendment Second Rules in 2022 was notified to align the EPR guidelines. Environmental compensation and biodegradable plastic definition is more clarified, and environmental compensation is more clarified in the recent amendment made in the July 2022. As per the extended producer responsibility guideline notified in 2022, this notification was made after the extensive consultation with all the central ministries, all the state governments, all the stakeholders involved, industry associations, recycler association, and other concerned stakeholders. These guidelines will reduce littered and unmanaged plastic waste, including that in legacy waste dump sites also, which was dumped from since way back. These rules also strengthen the waste management infrastructure and circular economy of plastic packaging waste, promote development of new alternatives to plastic. And why plastic packaging? This called is guidelines for extended producer responsibility for plastic packaging, because India has already banned the single-use plastic. And these guidelines also reduce plastic footprint to mandatory reuse of rigid plastic packaging, provide for sustainable plastic packaging, and reuse of recycled plastic in plastic packaging also. Salient feature of EPR guidelines. The salient features included in the EPR guidelines are compulsory registration of obligated entities, which include producers, importer, brand owners, and plastic waste processors. National EPR target category-wise mandated in the EPR regulation. 4 categories of plastic packaging are given in the EPR guidelines. Number 1, rigid plastic. Second, flexible plastic. Third, multi-layer plastic. And fourth, compostable plastic. Mandatory annual targets is prescribed in the EPR guidelines. Reuse of rigid plastic packaging mentioned in the EPR guideline. Recycling and use of recycled plastic content is also mandatory, include the mandatory annual targets. Salient feature of EPR guidelines are also contains generation of EPR certificate after recycling of the plastic material. The waste processor has to generate the EPR certificate. Transaction with reference to the fulfillment of EPR obligation only between the registered entity. If any entity not registered on the centralized portal of Central Pollution Control Board, they cannot take part in the any activity like collection and processing, reprocessing, or generation of EPR certificate. For that, any entity, either producers, importers, brand owners, or recyclers, have to register on the centralized portal of the CPCB. And there is also provision for verification and audit of producers, importers, and brand owners, and waste processor also through CPCB or concerned state pollution control board or pollution control committees. In case of if the producers PIBOs are involved in more than one or more than 2 states, then the responsibility is here with the Central Pollution Control Board. If the PIBO is involved in the processing or collection of the plastic waste in 1 or 2 states, then Central Concerned State Pollution Control Board or Pollution Control Committees are responsible to check with. There is also provision of environmental compensation on non-fulfillment of EPR targets. If the PIBOs are not fulfill their EPR obligation, there is a provision of environmental compensation which is applicable on the PIBOs only. Obligation to collect and process waste remains with PIBOs even after payment of EC. If they are paid the EC, still the obligation is with the producers to complete their obligation in the preceding years. The obligation is not completely overruled. There is a provision of committee to recommend measures for effective implementation of EPR, including amendments to EPR guidelines. For that, there is a provision to formation of a steering committee under the chairmanship of Central Pollution Control Board. They are also including the central ministries, line central ministries, state government departments, and some state pollution control boards also. These are the EPR target for plastic packaging mentioned in the rule. This is a percentage of EPR target. For year 2021-22, the percentage of EPR target is 25%. For 2022-23, it is 70%. And 2023-2024 is onwards is 100%. The minimum level of recycling of plastic packaging waste collected under EPR target. There are 4 categories of plastic packaging. Number 1, rigid packaging. Number 2, flexible packaging. Number 3, multi-layer packaging. And number 4, compostable plastic. And these are the targets given in the guidelines. The target is started from 2024-25 onwards only. After the producing the product in the market, after 2 years of producing the plastic waste market in the market. And this target is, there is a target for different kinds of plastic. Category 1, category 2, category 3, and category 4. And this is starting from 50%, 60%, and 70% to 80% for category 1. And for category 2 flexible packaging, it is started from 30% and end on 60% onwards. For category 3, the collection target is started from 32 and end on 60%. For compostable plastic, it will start from the 50% and end on 80%. So category 1 and category 4, the collection target is same, and category 2 and category 3, the EPR collection target is the same. There is also provision to mandatory use of recycled plastic in plastic packaging. The PIBOs are responsible to use the recycled plastic content in the further producing of the plastic material. And that target is also given in the rule. Category 1, category 2, and category 3 targets are given in the rule. It is started from 30% to 60%. For category 2, it is started from 10% to 20%. And for category 3, it starts from 5% and maximum up to 10% onward. Minimum obligation of reuse, category 1, rigid plastic packaging, is started from 2025-26 onward. And it is packaging 0.9 to 4.9 liter per kg. And red line show the packaging of equal to or more than the 4.9 liter to 1 kg. And this is started from 10% to 70%, 15 to 75% in 2026-27, and 20 to 80%, 27, 28, and 28, 29 onward, it will become 25 to 85%. There is the Central Pollution Control had already made a centralized portal where there is a PIBOs and all waste processors are registered. And the centralized portal allows registration of plastic waste processor and producer, importer, and brand owner. And the centralized portal is also responsible for issue of certificates by plastic waste processor and exchange of credits, real-time monitoring of transaction between PIBOs and plastic waste processor, levy of environmental compensation. Environmental compensation has not been clearly defined in the rule, but there is a provision that CPCB through the steering committee made under the provision of this extended producer responsibility can let down the environmental compensation based on the quantity of waste material generated and processed. System generated quarterly reports and annual returns to all the stakeholders. And there is a provision to end-to-end IT framework for EPR ensure ease of doing business. There is no any paperwork, only online work is there. From applying, making application to the PIBOs or waste processor to the generation of EPR certificate, which is the end product and in recycle. And these are the key modules of EPR portal. One module is for EPR registration for PIBOs. Second is registration of plastic waste processor And third one is trading and settlement of EPR obligation by PIBOs. And fourth, annual returns to be filed by all the stakeholders, including PIBOs and plastic waste processor. And fifth module, levy of environmental compensation. And there is a provision of third-party audits. There is also a accredited third parties are responsible to audit the plastic waste processor and PIBOs to get the material, to check the material balance, whether there is any leakage or not. And that can be ensured by the third-party audits. And there is also provision of training of capacity building of stakeholders, including municipalities, for better collection and processing of the plastic material. These are the centralized online portal developed by the CPCB, and you can get all the details from this portal. If you access to the dashboard, there is already more than 1,000 PIBOs are registered, more than 1,000 waste processors are registered, and more than 700 recyclers are registered under this portal so far. EPR certificate generation mechanism. This mechanism has already been clearly defined in the rules. EPR certificate will be generated by plastic waste processor who is recycling or reprocessing or co-processing the plastic waste material. They can generate the EPR certificate. EPR certificate can be used to offset against previous year EPR target and obligation, can be sold and purchased. But this is only for the same category of waste material, not for different category of waste packaging material. EPR certificate would be extinguished after fulfillment of EPR obligation only. Pricing of EPR certificate is through market mechanism. There is no any clearly defined any value that this is the value of the EPR certificate. It is total based on the market mechanism. PIBOs to provide recycling, including end of life disposal certificate from registered plastic waste processor only by 30th June of next financial year, while filing annual returns on the online portal to complete their EPR obligation. Otherwise, their EPR obligation will not be fulfilled and they can be given environmental compensation as per the law. The certificates and processes shall be subject to verification by CPCB, SPCB or PCC. In each and every case, if there is more than 2 states are involved, then all the responsibility lies with the Central Pollution Control Board. And if one state or up to 2 states are involved, then concerned state pollution control board and pollution control committees are responsible for all the things. And CPCB and SPCB will be responsible for registration, monitoring, verification, audit, review, and grievance redressal through online mechanism only. There is no any offline mechanism. The provision of environmental compensation is already given in the EPR guidelines notified in the February 2016. The imposition of environmental compensation on non-fulfillment of EPR target by PIBOs based on polluter pay principle. Responsibility to process plastic waste still remains with the PIBOs after payment of EC. The obligation will not be deemed to be fulfilled if they pay the environmental compensation. Obligation is still remain with them. The environmental compensation levied shall be returned to the PIBOs if the EPR target is completed by the PIBOs in a 3-year block period from the date of environmental compensation becomes due as given below. If they complete their EPR obligation within 1 year of levying of EC, then 75% of the environmental compensation deposited by the PIBOs can be returned. If completed within 2 years, then 60% would be returned. And if completed within 3 years, the 40% would be returned. After completion of 3 years on EC, getting to the entire EC amount shall be forfeited if PIBO does not fulfill the EPR target within 3 years. Then there is, if they complete their EPR target after 4 years, then there will be no return of environmental compensation to the PIBO. Yeah, circular economy. Besides this plastic waste management, EPR for plastic waste management tools, Ministry, in order to achieve the announcement of the Honorable Prime Minister, has also working on the Mission Circular Economy. And in that regard, Niti Aayog, under the aegis of Government of India, has constituted 11 committees, including all the concerned nodal ministries. And these are for municipal waste, scrap metals, e-waste, lithium-ion batteries, solar panel, gypsum, toxic and hazardous industrial waste, used dial waste, tire and rubber recycling, and end-of-life vehicles. Ministry is already implemented the EPR regulation in plastic packaging. E-waste management rules was notified in 2016, which has clearly defined the EPR of the producer, liability of the producer. Waste tires and waste battery. Waste tire EPR for the waste tire is recently notified by the ministry in July 2022, and battery waste management rules is also notified in August 2022 to cover the EPR target for the waste battery. And ministry is also working on introduction of the EPR for used dial and scrap metals, and comprehensive revision or amendment in e-waste EPR is underway. Earlier in 2016 notification, e-waste management notification, there was only 21 electronic items were covered under the EPR regime. But now ministry has proposed to include the 106 electronic items to cover under the EPR regime. Besides that, there is a complete transformation to compete with the ease of doing business of Government of India principle. And there is also a less compliance to keep in the mind the less compliance burden on the producers and recycler association. The e-waste management rules is underway in the changes, and it will be notified very soon. And most of the part of the circular economy, the EPR framework will help recovery of valuable materials through recycling. This will lessen burden on virgin and scarce resources. Role of states and UTs under the EPR obligation. SPCBs and pollution control committees to effectively enforce the waste management rules, strengthening waste management infrastructure to ensure fulfillment of EPR, and effective implementation of EPR by producer in plastic waste, e-waste, tire waste, and waste batteries. Circular economy cell to be created in environment departments in all the state governments and UTs, and develop capacities of infrastructure at district of million plus cities level to implement the EPR. Without that, the mandate and the scope of the EPR cannot be fulfilled and achieved. Thanks. This is from my side. Now I invite Mr. Ahmad Afdal, to share views from the board.
Thank you, Vinod, for that presentation. It was very informative to understand what's happening in India when it comes to implementing EPR. Thank you for having me here. My name is Afra. I represent Zero Waste Maldives. Zero Waste Maldives and Adelphi, Germany is co-developing an extended producer responsibility framework for the Maldives. We are a civil society organization. We are not like a huge consultancy firm, but Adelphi is a think tank based in Germany that is supporting us with setting this up for the Maldives. So I think I'll start off by sort of giving sort of a background on how maybe I got into this. Like I used to work for the Environmental Protection Agency in the Maldives, and even then, when I entered in 2017, I had seen a lot of documentation, policies by the government that EPR will get implemented, and it was always written in documentation because EPR is a key, environmental instrument that can be used. But I saw nothing getting done on the ground in terms of implementation, in terms of policy and these kind of things. So while I was working on this, I got the opportunity to participate in a UNDP program where it was a urban innovation challenge. So we had to propose like a solution to waste management issues. So littering was one of the key areas of focus. And then we proposed a deposit refund scheme, and we piloted the deposit refund scheme. And we got a very good return rate. We got an 80% over-the-counter return rate. And then we were like, okay, this sort of works, but then it doesn't make sense if you don't have the legislation to sort of back this up. So then we thought about how we could go about doing that. And then I unfortunately left the Environmental Protection Agency, and then I started this NGO, and then this is where we are now. So we got support from the Ocean Innovation Challenge, where 8 innovators got selected, and we were one of the 8 innovators that got selected to implement this kind of a solution. So our focus was on EPR, and that is what we're doing. So this is jointly implemented, as I mentioned before, and it is also our key partner is also the government of Maldives. So this is the project team. So from Delphi, we have Paolo and Evita, and from Zero Waste is myself and Miflal that's working on this project. And the main focus of the project really is to get an understanding and enhance understanding of the plastic pollution problem that is in the Maldives, and also to increase the EPR awareness between the stakeholders, because you can't really force something on somebody if you don't really understand what the implications are to them as well. So outcome 2 has been sort of a ongoing activity that we've been doing, and the stakeholder engagement has had mixed results, but it has been positive thus far. Then outcome 3 would be to actually develop the EPR scheme and also help to transition it into the national law. So since these will be in the slides that will be provided, I'm just going to glance over these. So I'll just go briefly about the country context. So in terms of laws and regulations and these kind of things that are in place in the Maldives, the main action that is driving EPR in the Maldives is the fact that the president of the Maldives announced that they would ban single-use plastics by 2023. And in that phase-out plan, EPR is a key component that has been incorporated. So that is what's the driving force behind it, because there is a high-level pledge to actually deliver on a global stage. And also the Waste Act, which is being developed, which has been developed, is also a key piece of legislation that also will enable EPR to be implemented in the Maldives. And the Waste Act has actually been sent to the Parliament on 17th of May this year, and it does include provisions for EPR to be implemented. So there are key areas that will allow EPR to be actually implemented and a law to actually back it up. Then what would need to be done is regulations to actually support that. So to actually get to this stage, we have done a lot of stakeholder consultations. So there are virtual in-person interviews, meetings, questionnaires, phone interview surveys. These kind of engagements are all things that we have actually done to try and get feedback and input in developing the scheme. So it is pretty much ground up. We consulted the public institutions like the ministries, the waste management operators, customs services, and also the local councils, because the Maldives, if you don't already know, has 1,192 islands. Of that, around 200 are inhabited islands, 250 are resorts. So it's logistically, it's a waste management nightmare, but also it provides a lot of opportunity because everybody's experience with the waste management infrastructure is also different. So their insights and inputs are also very different and also very useful. So we also met with a lot of private parties that are producers. So in the Maldives, there are very few manufacturers. So the term how we generally class producers really doesn't really apply to the Maldives, where most of the products are imported. So this might be more relevant to SIDS countries because they also import a lot of their products. We also talked to a lot of international partners, development organizations as well that were funding waste management projects in the Maldives and also engaged at different levels in the Maldives. And also we did talk to regional partners as well. And here are some pictures of some of the stakeholder consultations we've done. Coca-Cola and some of the local larger importers, as well as state-owned importers, as well as Parley for the Oceans, which you may be familiar with. Then we did do a field visit to Sri Lanka because Sri Lanka was already working on EPR, and Coca-Cola was quite engaged with us and wanted us to actually travel in and see what they were doing in Sri Lanka as well, so that we get a better understanding of what's happening on the ground in Sri Lanka. Then we had roundtable discussions with senior partners from the government joining, including the minister and from the president's office, and also from almost all the major producers, sorry, Then we also did a lot of desk research to figure out what the plastic generation is, because the main issue in the Maldives is also the lack of data, lack of access to data, as well as availability of data. And so there were two main data points that gave like a huge value, which was a report which was partially funded by Coca-Cola, but it generated this value of 29,400 tons of plastic per year as a waste generation figure for single-use plastics. And then a stat from the government, which puts the number at around 20,000. Then specifically, we were able to triangulate this PET bottle production, which is about 3,300 tons per year. And that is from only 3 producers that are active in the Maldives. We also did some studies on MRFs because there needed to be sort of like a diversion from the existing waste management infrastructure to sort of like a material recovery sort of mindset, because right now all the waste management activities are sort of pointed or aligned towards incineration. So MRFs could act as a diversionary sort of path. We also did studies in the islands because a lot of the infrastructure is different and the collection setup is also quite different in the islands. So we sort of try to figure out what the collection fees are and how that adds up, because that all factors into sort of the waste management cost per ton. So we average this around, this is inter-island, so meaning inside the island, what is the cost to actually consolidate and collect the waste to the waste management facility. Then we also did nationally how the transport costs are. So this from the north to the south, these are the sort of atolls that we have, and then the 1,192 islands are distributed amongst these atolls. So there is a lot of variance in terms of like the transport cost. So the logistics for an EPR setup really is quite intense in terms of like the mechanisms that will be need that has to come into place. So we looked into sort of trying to get the plastic and packaging waste to come in the same carbon footprint that's already existing in terms of supply transport. So there are these supply vessels that will take food and other supplies to the islands, and then there's sort of that logistical linkage. So this sort of setup is in that same carbon footprint, how that would potentially add up in terms of cost. So it comes down to about $129 per ton in terms of costing. So then we also did a lot of studies into the packaging itself. So the main entry point for products, as I mentioned before, is through the Maldives customs services. So we are very much import dependent. So even if you're producing stuff in the Maldives, it is coming via an import. You're not actually producing, refining maybe crude oil into PET or something like that. That's not happening. So we know exactly what's coming in through the import data. So customs really was the main gateway really to get all this, the key data points. But we did face a lot of challenges in terms of like the quality of data and the availability of data and the level of access to the data. So there were a lot of challenges, but we did manage to get enough for us to actually formulate an EPR scheme. So from the HS codes that are sort of classify the plastic and packaging waste, we did some studies on particular items of products. So like this particular energy drink, I think it comes from Bangladesh. It constitutes about 7.2% of the soft drinks that are imported. So in terms of significance, it's also a significant brand. So there might be imports of Coca-Cola and these other brands as well, but this also is a significant chunk. So from this, we did this similar exercise to the other products that are imported as well. And then we come to this figure based on the total number of liters imported in that particular year. So we sort of extrapolate and then figure out how much actual generation is coming from without actually measuring the waste at the end of life waste management. So we did the same for different products, and we did get a lot of different results. And depending on the type of product, like maybe shampoos, you have a multitude of different brands. So you get a lot of different packaging combinations and a lot of different sizes as well. So like the fraction that we are able to measure like diminishes if you have more brands and more variety. So this is sort of the end result of all this number crunching. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail, but this is of like 94, I believe it was 94 HS codes that the government sort of formulated in as part of the single-use plastic phase out, like the overarching strategy. And from that, we narrowed down HS codes that were related to plastic and packaging. So from that, we did take data for pads, tampons, and nappies as well, but the number will be a bit shocking, I think, once we move to the slide. But what we found out was that on the bottom corner, we see that the PET volume actually is much higher. The PET, like the production that is happening in country, accounts for about 50% of the PET waste or the packaging waste that's been generated. But this data mainly records like the hard plastics, the rigid plastics like PET, HDPE, these kind of materials. And this data that is coming for pads and diapers, just the packaging alone adds up to about 32 tons, 32% of the waste being generated in terms of plastics. So when we actually account for the weight of the diapers and pads that would be generated, it actually adds up to 90%. So it sort of balances everything in terms of the single-use plastic, generation that's happening. So we always talk about bottles as like the biggest contributor, but we are also because of that, we are also ignoring other waste streams that might be actually more difficult to, like diapers can't be really recycled. So we are actually ignoring those kind of waste streams that are a burden to island nations like the Maldives, where we have to figure out how to transport it somewhere and then maybe incinerate or like landfill it. So it is a cost burden that has no value, and we have to think about how to get rid of it. So those were the findings from those from the studies that we did. And for the next steps, what we are working on is sort of like an EPR manual that is specifically focused on SIDS countries. We have already pretty much wrapped it up. We are finalizing sort of these final edits to the layout, which usually always takes a long time. But we are pretty much done, and maybe in the next couple of months, you will actually be, we will publish this and you will have access to this. We're also making EPR videos alongside the manual so that you will have sort of like a brief, like so that you can just have a look at the video and understand what are the main components that would be in an EPR scheme if you're implementing it in a SIDS country. We also, as part of the project, have 2 more roundtable workshops to conduct, and then these will be hopefully in November or in January 2022. We will try and wrap that up. And we are also creating 3 different roadmap scenarios for the government, because this is, in the end, we are handing this over to the government to sort of implement. So it needs to make sense for the government to sort of take it up as well. So we have a business as usual, what they're already doing in terms of incineration and waste management. If you're going in this route, how EPR could be implemented. And also, if you modernize a waste management system with EPR and maybe MRFs, what could be the outcome then? And maybe something innovative and transformative. So this is also a component of the project that we are doing. And then this will also get delivered by the end of the project. We're also going to do a concept paper with specific to the Maldives, with the obligated industries and the materials covered by the EPR scheme and the responsibilities, and how a potential PRO could be set up. A lot of discussion has gone on today in terms of whether it should be competitive or monopolistic or like these kind of setups. So we have done sort of analysis, and also we have talked to the stakeholders that could be part of a PRO to figure out how best it could be implemented as well. And of course, EPR cannot come without targets, as Vinod has so elaborately put. There's so many targets and that you need to actually have for this to be successful. And we will actually come up with the targets in consultation with the government to see like obviously it has to be realistic to both the government as well as the stakeholders that will be obligated to actually participate in an EPR scheme. So we did look at how it could be potentially set up in the Maldives. And in the Maldives, we have the waste management company, WAMCO, which is like a state-owned enterprise that it has the mandate to actually do almost all the waste management operations in the country. So potentially we could have a PRO and the producers actually feed into the PRO and report to the government's authority. And then the normal EPR setup can work where there are the products and the waste fees are also controlled and sent through the city council and the local councils. We do have different levels of government oversight in terms of the decentralized governance that we have. So there are a lot of complications when implementing these kind of EPR actions. So this is one potential roadmap that we did develop for an EPR setup. We also developed the same with an MRF. So there could be potential for local recycling as well as recycling abroad, where we could actually send shipments abroad. But we are a bit mindful of this because of all the green walls that is coming up. And also as an island nation, we have to think about sort of self-reliance rather than trying to figure out, okay, let's give the plastic to maybe Sri Lanka or India and see if they can figure it out. But I think we should be self-reliant and figure out the plastic problem for ourselves, or else it will become a challenge for future me or potentially future government officials to try and figure out. So we don't want that. So we want to see and figure out how that can be done in country. So for the project, in terms of sustainability and scalability, the new global plastics resolution and the plastics treaty that is coming up actually does also push the agenda of EPR and also sustainable consumption and production. So this actually will help push EPR to the front line in terms of getting it rolled out in countries that has not already started that kind of work. So I think this will be a very interesting treaty to actually keep an eye on. Other than this, what we have planned for the project is to actually support the government in their implementation. So in terms of engagement, we are closely monitoring the Waste Act that is in Parliament. We have also gone to the Parliament to actually lobby and try and get them to include certain provisions like EPR is included in the Act, but there is no deadline for implementation. So we have lobbied at the Parliament to try and get that amendment in before it goes to the floor to be passed as the law. So other than that, we are also going to support a PRO that might be established in the Maldives, and we are working with the local producers to figure out how best that can be done. Then this whole project is sort of being implemented in the Maldives, but we are thinking about how it can be replicated in SIDS countries. So the whole idea is that if you don't really have data, then you sort of start with what you have and then expand on that kind of data set that's lacking, and then try and implement EPR in a piecemeal sort of approach. But from the data that Vinod also has shared, it feels like the SIDS countries really generate very, very little amount of waste, but we also have the burden of operationalizing a whole mechanism for waste collection and segregation and processing. So that though it is necessary, it is also going to be a burden. So there needs to be sort of global financial instruments that needs to be mobilized so that this can be implemented in SIDS countries. We also try and promote the project as much as possible. So we have been to the the UN Ocean Conference as well as the One Ocean Conference, and we have presented our work at these conferences as well. And here we are today as well, presenting the work that we're doing. That actually is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ahmed. I'd like to ask you to stay because according to the agenda, next session is question and answer. I would so like to invite Dr. Singh to come here. So, yeah, let's go there. So the floor is yours. Please, if you have some questions to the presenters, we have 5 minutes only. Is there any questions? Or probably somebody to share problems that they face? No questions? We have one, please. You have microphone, right?
Thank you. I have a question about India's presentation. India has a very ambitious recycling targets. I think it's quite a high targets for industries. And you also mentioned about certificates. So that also requires robust monitoring mechanism. How can you ensure the industry to follow these targets? And how do you monitor and ensure the compliance? Thank you.
Actually, the recycling target has been started from 2024-26 onwards. Now only EPR target has been given to the PIBOs, right? And this is for 25% of the processing of the producing the plastic waste into the market. And ministry is also working hard with the Central Pollution Control Board and all the state pollution control board and pollution control committees to get in line with the proper collection of the plastic waste management, so that after getting the proper collection of the plastic waste, it will go to the recycler, and then they will fulfill the target of the recycling target. And for that, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has some financial provision to strengthen the municipalities to better collection of the plastic waste. And I think when this will happen in 2024-26 onwards, then when the recycling target shall be completed by the recycler and it is the obligation of the PIBOs, then that time, if there is any unfulfillment of EPR obligation, then it will certainly under review, maybe reviewed by the ministry, if EPR obligation is not be fulfilled by the PIBOs. But right now it is on the right way. Ministry has working efficiently with the CPCB and SPCBs and PCCs to complete the target of the recycling of plastic waste.
Thank you for your detailed answer. Any follow-up question? Okay, yeah.
There is a provision of EPR certificate based on the market-based mechanism, and EPR certificate will be based on the processing of the plastic waste material into the end product. And that EPR certificate can be exchanged between the different PIBOs in the same category of plastic waste. If they are surplus EPR certificate generated by the recycler, they can exchange, or they can offset their previous year obligation also. Yeah. I think no. 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 It is between the waste process, plastic waste processor and the PIBOs. Yeah, but certificate can be exchanged between the PIBOs to get their EPR obligation fulfilled, because ultimate responsibility is the PIBOs to fulfill their EPR obligation. Waste processor, plastic waste processor is only to generate the EPR, but obligation is still with the PIBOs to fulfill their obligation, EPR obligation. The EPR certificate exchange between PIBOs only.
Kira, please, sir.
Yeah, pardon me. Yeah. If there is any lack in the fulfillment of the target given by the online portal CPCB, then there will be a provision of environmental compensation. if they are not obligate their target. And this target will be completed after paying the environmental compensation. They can fulfill their EPR obligation within 3 years. There is a provision of return back of the environmental compensation of 75%, 60%, and 40% for first year, second year, third year. And after, if they fulfill their EPR obligation after fourth year, then there will be no return of the EC charges to the PIBOs.
Yes, another question, please. Why?
Yes, I have one question. I wonder, when you look at the introduction of BPR in India, when you select the system to be certificate, which would be managing did you investigate others? How do you have across this procedure? Which are the main reasons why?
It will be certainly based on the some background material and data available, and after the extensive consultation with the all concerned stakeholders, including plastic waste recyclers, plastic waste producer associations, and the line central ministries and state government departments. Thereafter, this provision has been made in the EPR application.
Thanks. Last question. Yeah. You don't have microphone? Yeah.
One more question to the representative from Maldives. Quite impressive the process that Maldives is following. I have a question on the HS, like tax code, because we also look at this code and then we couldn't really identify plastic products because most of the products imported under different tax code. How could you identify the plastic products in that exercise? If you can share any experience.
Thank you. That question, I was surprised that actually came up. But what we actually did for the Maldives was from that HS code, like the HS code maybe just says soft drinks and plastic packaging, but then it doesn't really, you don't really get that breakdown. But our custom services actually has the product name as well available, as well as the importer names available. So these are not published data, but it is data that that sort of customs authority actually maintains. But it might not be standardized across the countries because that is not a standard data point that you would actually share with others. So it is an internal thing for maybe compliance and these kind of things. But we were able to identify importers as well as the product, and then we were able to purchase the product and then empty out the contents and then actually measure the container at the container level. So we actually measured close to like 200 products and then got those data points, and then we made those calculations. So I can give you more details over the next few days if you're interested. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for your complete answer. Any other questions? Oh, so many questions. But I told you that we have 5 minutes. Do we have time for another 2 questions? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, please, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So actually, this question is for the moderator, for Mihai. Okay. So in the presentation about EPR in EU, so when we see on the diagram, we can see the importance of the PRO. So just want to ask, how many PROs are there in the PRO in EU? And so I think it should be like several PROs for different items or different commodities, right? That is one. And also because the PRO is the one will be spending money, so it seems to be very powerful organization. So how to ensure the PRO will make the best use of money for recycling? And because not only they use money for collection and recycle, but also other activities, for example, awareness raising and incentivization. So it seems that different many activities have are carried out by PROs. So what is the monitoring mechanism for that body? Thank you.
Thanks for this question. First, about the number of PROs in Europe, hundreds, even thousand, I don't know exactly, because the countries, they prefer the competitive scheme. Wine in the morning told us that in Sweden, usually there are two PROs for waste stream, right? But in other countries, there are much more. For example, in Bulgaria, for electronic equipment, we have 8 exchanges. It could be increased, it could be decreased, because the government license these organizations. If they do not fulfill the target systematically, they can lose their license. Also, when UK was in European Union, regarding the waste electric and electronic equipment, they had more than 40 PROs. So it's quite diverse, but most of the countries prefer the competitive scheme, depending on the waste stream. And regarding your other question, how the activities of PROs are controlled. Yeah, there is a mechanism not only to control the achievement of the targets, but also the other activities, including awareness campaigns, including eco-design. Basically, it is done by auditing, as I explained to you. So PRO at the end of the year, usually I speak usually, they have to present a report which is audited by independent auditor. And in the report, annual report, they describe all their activities throughout the year, how they achieve the targets, and also how much money they spent for awareness raising, what exactly were the campaigns, everything is described, and including these financial results, the financial costs for these activities, they are part of the audit. That's the usual scheme I'm explaining. Okay, I hope this answers your question. And there was another question over there.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah. So this question is mainly for the India. So with your experience, what was the strategy used to tackle this unbranded plastic products? Because it's very difficult to trace the producer at the usage stage, especially the single-use plastics. So what was the strategy used in India? So getting that EPR application for this unbranding plastics.
Actually, single-use plastic has already been banned by the India. Only plastic packaging is allowed under the EPR regimes. So there is a provision for producers, importer, and brand owners only to get registered to fulfill their EPR obligations. And single-use plastic is already banned through the notification, and it is effective from the July 2022.
Questions? Did I saw hands? No. Okay. Okay, so we can close this session and have a nice coffee break. Session here is dedicated to EPR. We will have 4 issues to discuss, starting with whether in these countries there are proper preconditions for establishment of EPR. We'll discuss whether there is a cost recovery mechanism able to raise enough money to ensure proper collection of residual waste. Then we'll discuss the availability of information systems to track the achievement of the targets. Then we'll discuss the role of the municipalities, whether they should be involved directly in waste collection, or as an alternative, the waste collection to be awarded to private companies. And the fourth issue that we'll discuss is to compare competitive systems with monopolistic systems. And what were the discussions when two countries established their EPR systems regarding this issue. First, we'll start with Ibu Agnes. She prepared a short presentation describing the situation in Indonesia regarding these four topics. Then we'll start discussing it one by one, and everybody will share, everybody from the panelists will share its opinion regarding these three topics. Okay, Agnes, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me with this limited time to share information about what has been done in Indonesia. Minister of Environmental and Forestry Regulation number 75 2019 is in line with UNEA resolution and plastic pollution. Plastic pollution can naturally be transboundary, especially marine plastic. So cooperation between countries is needed with full life cycle plastic approach. Starting from design, production, distribution, consumption, post-consumption, and reuse and recycling after consumption. The importance of implementing circular in ending plastic pollution through the sustainable design of product and materials, reuse, remanufactures, or recycling to keep product or material from being used circularly for as long as possible to save resources and prevent or reduce waste generation. Yeah. Here are the data and facts about plastic recycling according to the result of the study conducted by the Ministry of Industry, where 34% of food and beverage packaging plastic are PE plastic, and 31% of food and beverage packaging is PP plastic. So several types of plastic are widely used for food beverage packaging. And next, we have received as many as 38 waste reduction planning document. This is a producer progress report have submitted a waste reduction planning document from producer. In this document, various many producer attempt to limit the generation of packaging waste, recycle packaging waste, and reuse it. The rest we are still communicating to guide a producer in the context of implementing producer obligation in waste reduction. Next, the implementation of the regulation of the Minister of Environment and Forestry regarding the waste reduction roadmap by producer regulated that there is a need for redesign of packaging, among other using material that can be recycled or reused. using recycled material, remove plastic label and seal, using monomaterial, and the color of beverage packaging made from like PET is clear or bluish, and set the minimum size for various type of packaging. In addition, there is a need for packaging standard, including compostable, recyclable, and reusable. Producers are required to prepare planning document as a stake for a producer in reducing good and packaging waste, because starting January 1st, 2030, several type of packaging will be banned. Producers are given 10 years to think about to try out and create alternative substitute. So this is a period of preparation for producer before the ban is carried out. And this is the Minister Environment and Forestry Regulation as legal operation framework for the implementation of the circular economy. Manufacturer or producer encourage to eliminate, redesign, and sell unpackaged product. Distributor or retail as a collection point for a packaging waste, and collaborate in effort to collect packaged waste and sell it without packaging. And next, the community as consumer are encouraged to be able to implement responsible consumption and minimal waste lifestyle. Sort waste at source and collect waste belonging to the producer. Next, collector partnered for collection and take back of packaging waste based on brand and brand owner. This is in Indonesia. We have a waste bank, social entrepreneur, license waste management service. The former sector registered as producer partner. Next, packaging waste recycling partner based on brand and brand owner. Next, producer partner in the manufacture of new product packaging with recycled material like pelletizing, blowing, molding, injection, extraction. This is done to encourage producer to achieve the target of reducing waste by 30 by the end of 2029. Talking about a barrier in Indonesia, the circular economy for business or producer is new. So not many people are leading there, but in terms of vision and building of circular economy business model. Currently, only one bottle mineral water, only one bottle mineral water producer has implemented circular economy, like PET plastic packaging waste is recycled into mineral water packaging again, and plastic detergent product packaging like pouch and sachet is recycled into material used to make new packaging. All of this is the implementation of a circular economy closed loop, and more recycling is done to change into other form of a t-shirt or glove. Then the following is example of the activity like detergent rinso with a delivery facility antar aja, pick up and deliver sort garbage from home to be deposit in the waste bank for free. And the other like this is cosmetic and food beverage producer collaboration with retail in collecting packaging waste to recycling. Yes, so this is and yeah, thank you for your attention. Hopefully this discussion will give us ideal solution for each country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Agnes. We know that Indonesia is starting to implement the newly adopted legislation. As everywhere, the first steps are heavy. It's not easy to implement such a complex system at once, and especially in such a huge country with so many people living there, so many islands. The challenge is quite big. So in order to implement it, we need proper conditions. We need that first, there are basic services in all islands, which is quite a challenge to serve every settlement in a small island, in such a big country. That's why I'd like to ask you how the waste management is organized, especially do we have problems in serving all these islands, all these settlements? Because if there are problem with usual waste collection, probably there will be much bigger problems with EPR separate collection. That's why I'd like to ask you about the financing of the system. I know from my previous experience, it's quite interesting. You have subsidies from the national government to the local government. Also, you have the so-called retribution fees, which the household have to pay to the local governments, and the local governments could use this money. Could you elaborate more on this about the waste management, general waste management? Is it established sufficiently, and the financing?
Okay, let me try to answer. The local government budget for the financing of waste management in its area. This budget include the cost of waste management at the final processing site, and operation and maintenance of heavy equipment at the landfill, and operation and salary of janitors. Thus, the better the waste management in landfill, such as the sanitary landfill. The greater the funds that the local government must allocate it. The landfill allocation fund is getting better, because if it's a sanitary landfill, it must be stockpiled every day after operational hour. And so there needs to be a budget to buy backfill. If there is no sufficient retribution, then the local government budget will only focus on financing landfills. And therefore is necessary of landfill is necessary to allocate a fund through a retribution system that cover operational financing for waste transportation to purchase or of landfill. In addition, there is a need for waste management facilities at the source to reduce it to the final processing site, such integrated waste processing site and recycling center. Therefore, based on the regulation of the Ministry of Home Affairs, number 7, regarding the procedure for calculating user fees in the implementation of waste management, it's hope that local government can calculate how much user fees can be withdrawn from the community. However, what is currently running in some area is that the waste retribution fee is combined with the levy and street lighting tax, which is charged to the public electricity bill. Currently, the application of the collection of waste leaves has not been implemented and is still in the drafting state in several regions. Another way to deal with a waste management problem in the region is to use the village fund owned by its village, so that several village owned enterprises have built waste management facilities in the town and implemented the collection of leaves for residents in their area, although not big as the retribution. That will be determined based on minister household number 7. This can reduce the burden of waste to the landfill and generate profit for the village government.
Thank you. Quite detailed explanation. You can see that in such a big country, introducing waste collection and cost recovery mechanism in some parts, especially in small parts, small islands, small settlements, it's challenging. But in Indonesia, there are two available methods, two available ways how to finance it. And probably in the near future, this draft regulation will be adopted, will become mandatory, and there will be a proper waste collection everywhere, so that we can build on it and establish EPR system that covers the whole territory. I'd like to ask the same question to Mr. Dharmasiri. How the waste management in Sri Lanka is organized, especially how it is financed, and what are the results of this financing, whether there are a proper waste collection system established covering all territories. Yes, Mr. Dharmasiri, please, stage is yours.
Yes, in Sri Lanka, waste management related and environmental things are regulated by the Central Environmental Authority, where I am working, and waste management, handling and things are legally given to the municipalities, local authorities. Local authorities in Sri Lanka has divided into 3: municipal councils, urban council, and divisional council of Pradeshiya Sabha. Basically, these local authorities get funds in 3 ways. Mainly, they are getting funds from their property taxes. They are rented out, and the taxes getting for their main annual income. And second thing, they get some government allocation. Government allocation mainly for administrative activities, such as for payment of salaries of the waste management officers permanently working in local authorities. Thirdly, they are getting funds from special projects, and also based on the requirement. If there are any special requirement for final disposal facility, if particular local authorities request that, based on that request, government give funds. Actually, amount of money from annual revenue is from each local authority decide the percentage of annual allocation for waste management. From they have a annual council. Council decide the percentage of funds for local waste management activity. Waste management services mainly that municipalities and urban councils need to provide facility, waste collection facility for all the household in this area. But Pradesh Sabhas use waste management services only for their households situated around the city area, because that far away area of the Pradesh Sabha or lower divisions have bigger land area of their households, and most of the people living in the lands having the somewhat larger land area, they manage their waste within their households. And there are some final disposal facilities provided by the government, some like sanitary landfills and also incinerators. And the issue regarding these issues faced by the local authorities are mainly facilities available for their final disposals. And thank you.
Thank you. Again, quite detailed answer. Again, we have different schemes of financing, and as usual, the large infrastructural projects, they are subsidized by the government, and linking the waste management costs with the property tax. Actually, in the beginning of establishment of such cost recovery mechanism, it's quite a good solution, because property tax, it will be collected for sure, because in these waste funding systems, the main problem is to collect the tax, which is always a challenge. And the property tax, it's easily identifiable who is responsible, and such tax is easily collected. So again, we can see that the foundation for sustainable financing in Sri Lanka is already established. Of course, it needs improvement, as everywhere, I think. Next, I'd like to ask about the European experience in this issue. I'd like to ask why, especially, are there government subsidies for investments in infrastructural projects in Sweden, and probably if you have some advanced systems of taxation of waste management, like pay-as-you-throw mechanism. So I'd like to hear what you would say, just to compare the two systems. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think I can talk a little bit more from a European Union point of view, because it's quite the same in many countries in Europe, not only in Sweden. But basically, if you start with the finance of the regular waste management from municipalities and from citizens, most of the countries apply some kind of user charge system, which means that you pay in order to pay for your waste management service. So it's not a part of the property tax or something like that. It's a separate system, which is of course a necessity if you wanted to use the system also in order to impose different kind of economical instruments, which we have done in many places in Europe. For example, kind of pay-as-you-through system as we have in Sweden, for example. We have a differentiation of the user's fee depending on the level of recycling and the level of collection you apply in different households. And it's also depending on the volume you subscribe to in your containers or the weight you collect. So there are different incentives. Also, for example, when we introduced the separate collection of food waste a couple of years ago in most of the municipalities, many of them also introduced kind of a steering instrument, meaning that though, however, this new facility to have a separate collection of food waste will increase the overall cost, they made it like an incentive to tell people that if you agree to use this separate collection of food waste, it will be the same cost as before. But if you don't agree, if you want to continue to non-separate your waste, you have to pay more. So it made a contribution or a steering instrument in order to sort more. And in contrary to what we thought, because we thought that if we introduce a new kind of separation, because we have already a separation of packaging waste, and we thought that people will be a little bit burdened. They will feel not comfortable to have another kind of separation. The result was the opposite around. So it turned out to be the way that the more you sort, the more you sort. So it seems to me that if you ask people to sort more, they will continue to sort more if you apply a certain kind of system, of course. So, and I also think that in most countries in Europe, there are different kind of investment support. For example, we have had in Sweden for many years, different kind of support in order to build, let's say, for example, biogas plants in order to take care of the food waste for production of biogas and biofertilizer. You can achieve like up to 50% in grants from the government. And the same can be seen also in other parts of Europe. So absolutely, there are many kinds of incentives in order to encourage the development of waste management on the European side. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Quite extensive explanation. I hope it answers some questions how to further encourage EPR, especially to encourage people to sort more, applying different economic instruments other than EPR. Next topic of discussion would be about whether there are proper foundation for tracking the achievement of the waste targets, waste recycling targets. As I mentioned in my presentation, we need a very sophisticated information system and reporting system so that every collector, every operator of sorting, recycling facilities report to a national system, to a central system, so that we have enough information to find out whether the targets are achieved or not. I'd like to ask again Agnes, because in Indonesia there is such system established for collecting information about the waste management services. The waste management operators are obliged to report. I'd like to ask her how it's functioning right now, and what are the plans to expand this system so that it could serve EPR system. So please, Agnes.
Thank you. Regarding with management information system, In Indonesia, the waste management information system is a tool for local governments to input or report data on waste reduction and handling. The information content is the National Waste Management Information System, consists of general data, information from provincial and district or city profile data, information on district or city and district capital data, and information on facility data, and periodic data on waste management facilities and the achievement of waste management policies and strategies. The result of the data input will display regency, municipal, provincial or waste management performance balance sheets containing the amount of waste generated, the amount of waste reduction, waste reduction, waste recycling, waste reuse, and the amount of waste handling, sorting, collection, waste transportation, processing to how much residue enter the landfill. This is a final processing. And district or city, they have a Jaksrada, namely a Jaksrada report. This is a policy and strategy achievement. And regional waste management performance index. This is in system information, and initial information on monitoring Adipura. Adipura is an award intended for district or cities that have good performance in waste management. Thank you.
Thanks, Agnes. Just one additional question. What about waste banks, waste collectors? Are they obliged to report either to local government units or on a more central database?
Our waste bank report to the local government. The local government collect from the waste bank.
Thanks. So as you may see, the whole stream of municipal waste and also recyclable waste, which is collected by waste banks in Indonesia. The waste banks, these are the collectors that are specialized in collecting recyclable waste. So already there is information about what is collected and what is sent for recycling. So, of course, this system needs further improvement, needs identification of all waste banks, because, as I know, not all municipalities there's a register of waste banks. But it's a good system for establishing and it should be scaled up so that it could serve EPR purposes, but the foundations are already there, already in Indonesia. So I'd like to ask about the situation in Sri Lanka, about who is obliged to report waste-related data, waste collected, waste recycled. Are there any information system database? Please.
Currently in Sri Lanka, local authorities collect data according to a weekly timetable. They collect basically waste in two types: recyclable waste and degradable waste. Degradable waste 2 days per week, and recyclable waste also degradable waste days 1 day after and day by not daily, 1 day after. Recyclable waste 2 days per week. And after collecting recyclable waste, they further segregate into further segregation is done by the local authority people, and data keeping is by local authorities. The municipal council basically having web bridges, and they have computerized database most of the time. But other urban council and lower division Pradesh Sabhas are also should keep their data and should maintain the database. And regarding the EPR, and EPR in Sri Lanka, we have included the provisions into the National Environmental Act, by which the Central Environmental Authority was established. And we have, parallel to the EPR, we are now started the drafting regulations. And we have, under EPR, we have proposed online reporting system, in which we are going to introduce a systematic way of collecting recyclable waste. And we are discussing 2 proposals under EPR. One is material recovery facility, and other is the target-based, not other thing is the deposit return system. And also we are going to introduce EPR based on the product basis. We have started ban or controlling the single-use plastic, which are unnecessary use of single-use plastic items have been banned. Up to now, we have banned 7 or 8 plastic items, and we are going to give targets for the producers based on their productions. Currently, recyclable rate actually around 4 to 6%. Annually, we are going to increase the targets of recycling. The producers need to be registered with their business registration and environmental protection license. And also the producers should have agreement between recycler and collectors. That's the situation of Sri Lanka.
Thanks, Mr. Dharmasiri. Quite interesting system, especially for collecting separately recyclable waste and the other waste, also registering the quantities collected and having this information available for the municipalities. I hope you will upgrade this system of reporting when EPR system is established, and use this valuable information. So I'd like also to ask Wayne about the situation in Europe. We know that regarding the reporting, many European countries, they are going to another level by registering every shipment of the waste, meaning that there is the annual reporting or aggregated reporting, but when the waste changes its owner, it's registered, and this change, including the type of waste, including the quantity of waste, is registered online in a national system. So please, Wayne, explain the situation.
Yes, thank you. I think I can only talk about the Swedish condition because it differs a little bit from place to place. But I wanted to go back from the very beginning because we introduced EPR for packaging. It was like 30 years ago. And obviously in the first 10 years was quite complicated actually in order to collect all the data and the registration or the volumes and to have the information from the PROs about how much was really collected in, for example, on the municipal level. It took many years in order to achieve all these figures, which of course are very important in order to deal with a few further development and planning and so on. But since 2008, we have in Sweden a computer-based reporting system. We call it Waste Web, and it includes all categories of waste which relate to the municipalities. So the PROs, they are obliged to report to the municipalities, and then the municipalities, they add on their own waste management, so their collection of organic waste and residual waste and all the figures about what is going to recycling, organic waste, treatment, incineration, landfill, etc. But also about the infrastructure, such as how many bins there are, how often do you collect the recyclables in different kind of area. So there are enormous a lot of information. All this information are provided by the municipalities by themselves into this computer-based system. And it also contains things like cost, about customer satisfaction and things like that. So it becomes like a benchmarking system. And then in return, the municipality can use this system in order to compare themselves by the neighboring municipalities to see how can we improve our production and our activity. And in the beginning, I must say that was a little bit sensitive, because then people can say, well, that municipality over there, they are better than we are. And, you know, the politicians sometimes got angry about that. But today it's not sensitive anymore. So it's developed really, really well. And now we also share this kind of system with the other Nordic countries. So they use more or less the same system. So it developed very well. And we provide us, the municipalities, all the data, which then are used by the central government, and they send the data to the European Statistical Authority. So we are in charge, you can say.
Thanks, Wayne. Quite good explanation, useful for comparing the systems. The next question that I like to discuss with our panelists, it's maybe the eternal question, who have to be responsible for actually collecting the waste, whether it should be the municipalities, or whether such services should be awarded by PROs to private contractors. There are advantages, there are disadvantages. We in Europe apply different systems. For example, in Eastern Europe, we prefer more private collectors, just because our municipal separate collection system during the transition from the communism to market economy, they were just destroyed. They do not exist anymore when EPR appeared. So we have to establish a new. And probably for countries in Asia and Pacific that do not have properly working municipal separate collection system, this would be a better solution. So first, I'd like to ask Ibu Agnes about what is the situation in Indonesia. I know that according to the legislation, waste banks, they could be hired by PROs, but please, Agnes, explain.
Thank you. In Indonesia, so far in terms of recalling the waste bank, the unit or parent assisted by the regional government has become one of the collection point for packaging waste. This is very helpful for producer. Although by law they are required to provide shelter facilities, but in this case, it can cooperate with private and government collecting partner. On the other hand, producer collaborate to collect packaging waste for recycling, as has been running in Bali province with IPRO, Indonesia Packaging Recovery Organization, which consists of several producers collectively collect packaging waste. In this case, they are also collaborating with a waste bank in Denpasar City, for example. Besides that, they are also working with temporary waste processing site. In its application, both individual and collaborative must be integrated with the waste collection service system in the district or city. Funding can be done by sharing or completing what is needed in each region. Thank you.
Thank you. So basically, it's a mixed system, and PROs could choose. I'd like also to ask about the situation in Sri Lanka. I fear we already had the answer from the previous question, knowing that municipalities are doing separate collection of recyclable waste. But please, Mr. Dharmasiri, explain how the municipalities will be involved in EPR. What are the plans?
In Sri Lanka, most of the recyclable facilities are having with private parties, and private parties have sometimes they have their own collecting network, and municipalities collect recyclable items, and some municipalities do some value addition, like things crushing and watching, like things to facilitate the recycling. And also there are some informal collectors of recyclable waste. They directly selling their collection to the recyclers, and the central government as a facilitation for recycling, sector by sector, central government discuss with the stakeholders and identify the issues pertaining with recycling and use solution for that. For instance, first we selected the PET water bottle, and recyclers complain the issues the pigmentation of PET, and also the labeling issue, like things. We voluntarily we publish things not to add when producing the PET water bottle, to produce in the white color, and also the labeling should not be PVC, and it should be non-PVC label. Likewise, actually in Sri Lanka also it's a mixed system.
Yeah, it's a mixed system. But did you discuss already with the stakeholders what is their preference, whether producers would like to work with municipalities, or whether they like to work with the private system already established for profitable waste, or even to work with the informal sector? Did you discuss this issue already? Or it's upcoming?
Mainly that producers are willing to work with the government, actually with Central Environmental Authority. Central Environmental Authority decisions related to waste management, decisions are taken by a stakeholder committee, We have a state committee, and based on that committee, we get decisions, and most of the producers are like to work with central government.
Okay, thanks. It's self-explanatory because there are a municipal system already in place. So why not to exploit it? And that's my question to Wine. We know the differences in Europe. I already mentioned this. I'm not sure about Sweden, how it is, but my suspicion is that you didn't destroy your municipal systems for collecting recyclable waste. You rely on municipalities. So could you explain the situation?
Yeah, I can do. Actually, we did. When we introduced the EPR for packaging, we actually in Sweden we decided to separate the collection and to give the collection totally to the PRO separately from the municipalities' responsibility for collection of other type of waste. Now, actually, this year, 30 years later, we reversed it. So now we give it back to the municipalities in order to arrange for the separate collection of packaging. And the reason have been that after year and year, we have seen that the system for collecting of packaging becomes more and more alike the system for collection of normal waste. And therefore, it makes sense to sort of integrate that in the same facility. And therefore, we found out that that facility would be the municipalities. But it's also important to separate. There are two issues here, because sometimes in the discussion, it mixed up a little bit, because now we gave the authority to organize the collection to the municipalities. Of course, then it's up to them to decide whether that should be operated in-house or by private collectors. Again, in Sweden, about half. So we have half private collector and half municipal collectors, so to say. So in Sweden and also in other parts of Europe, it's most of the time the situation is like this. If you ask the PRO what they want, they most of the time prefer to work together with the municipalities because it will be safe and they know who they are talking with. But if you ask the collectors, they want to have a more competitive system, because then they think they can make more money out of it. But that is not the purpose of the PROs. So it depends very much about the situation. And in some countries, like for example, in France and in Belgium, it's mandatory to use the municipal collection service. So it differs from one size to another country. It differs the whole time. And of course, if you introduce such more advanced system like deposit return system, as I show on the slide, then it's not at all involved with the municipality. So what I try to say that once the collection system becomes more integrated and looks more like the municipal collection of normal waste, it makes sense to have a more integrated system that will reduce the transportation, and the logistic can be more efficient, and so on and so forth. But it's not, there is no single answer.
Thanks again. So we planned to discuss another question about what is preferable, competitive versus monopolistic systems, but maybe it's better to have some more time about questions and answers. And let's see how it's going. If there are not so many questions, we'll have time to discuss even the last topic that we planned. But now the floor is yours to ask questions, our panelists, regarding these three topics that we discussed. I remind you about cost recovery mechanism, about information system and tracking the achievement of the waste, and municipal versus private collection which is better. So anybody dare to ask? Who will be the first? Yeah.
I have a comment. I think that in many countries, specifically in low and middle incomes country, I think the issue about how to sort of integrate the informal sector is normally a larger issue than how to integrate the municipal sector, and also much more sensitive from many point of view. I assume there is no final answer to that either, but still, I think that's a very crucial issue.
Yeah, this would have been our fifth questions. Well, we discussed it, but we decided that five questions are too much, so we had to choose which one to reduce the questions. So, are there any questions, or you feel tired already? Probably. Yeah.
Involving the informal sector. I think UNDP does have a lot of experience on that, right? India, I think we did a lot of experience also. They have a lot of experience on involving the informal sector in waste planning, and we do want to focus also on creating this social benefits, not just about waste management. So we'd really love to hear your thoughts, really. Not just questions, but if you have comments, if you have anything to share, we'd love to hear about it.
Okay. Yeah, let's see. There is a question.
Hi, so again, Saloni here from UNDP India. And Zin, thank you for bringing up the matter. So in our UNDP's intervention in India comes with corporate support. So the program is funded by corporate setups. And the mandate to start with was for setting up material recovery facilities in coordination with the urban local bodies. So in some ways, this is like a tripartite support to the whole plastic waste or dry waste management ecosystem. However, we have not limited our work just to material flow and material management, because from the development lens is central to our approach to this sector or to work in this sector. So what we do is through our implementation partner or the service provider that we engage for operating the material recovery facility, and there is a close oversight by the UNDP team on the operations of the facility. We ensure that the waste pickers are also integrated into the facility. Now, that could be in the form of assured livelihoods, assured jobs. It could be in the form of skilling or capacity building. And as a part of our COVID response effort, we also went a step ahead, and we said that there are several government benefit programs that are available for this community, but for whatever reason, this community has not been able to really access them. Despite, in some cases, having the necessary documentation to avail those government benefits, and in some cases, because they do not have the necessary documentation. So we went ahead and launched Project Utthan, whereby we first did an assessment of the socio-economic status of waste pickers across the country. We covered 15 states, and this survey covered almost 9,300 waste pickers. And basis the insights we got from that survey, we decided that actually, the Utthan intervention would first ensure that the waste pickers have the necessary documentation, which in some case itself can be a very big challenge and an intervention in its own right. And then for the ones that we're able to get the necessary documentation arranged for, then to use that documentation to get them access to health benefits, education benefits, the government supported bank accounts, etc. So we've identified multiple government benefit programs. Sometimes they vary from state to state. So our work is customized from state to state and providing them that linkage and getting them access to those government benefit programs. So I think in that sense, we see that the intervention in India that UNDP is being able to do is also working on, I would say, comprehensively integrating the informal sector and formalizing them. So this is not about waste management by leaving out the informal sector, but waste management or circular economy by comprehensively integrating the informal sector.
Sure. Thank you. Informal sector in Vietnam, we have they have a long time to survive in Vietnam now, more than 100 years. It's take a role very important in the circular economy very soon in Vietnam. So, but as they are now the collect recyclable material, source them, gather them, and take them to the recycling site. However, their labor is very rudimentary and the small scale. It's difficult to meet to the demand for the large scale recycling, because now EPR we improve for the huge, for the big recycling company. But with the informal sector now, they do not respond to the demand from the recycling company, so that they must be reunion between them to make it better, to make it larger, to make it more formal, like create the enterprise or create the association like the Brazil experience. Now in Brazil experience, the informal sector, they can negotiate with the local government to collect the scrap in the area on the city. So it's better to if they can reform them by themselves. And in Vietnam, EPR policy support them through the recycling organization. We cannot support them directly because because they informal. They don't have a organization, so we can support them. But through the EPR, through the recycling unit, the recycling unit receive the money from EPR, so that they can buy the material from the informal sector with the higher price. So that's the solution in Vietnam, and they can receive the support from the EPR if they have their own company. So the EPR in Vietnam will change the informal sector to the formal sector with the large scale. Thank you. Yes, for the relate to the topic, I have many idea from the barrier for the circular economy on the plastic industry. There are many barrier on the circular economy, like because there are too many kind of plastic and plastic material or plastic products, so it's not easy to classify or sort or recycle them. And most of the plastic products are contaminate or have other substance after use. It means that it's difficult to collect or recycle. And the price of the recycling is higher than the price of the raw material. And recyclable material is lower than the virgin material. And in Vietnam, we lack of the technical regulation on the recycling quality, especially in the food and beverage industry. So it's difficult to connect, to recognize, to put the recyclable recycle material after recycle to the market, because there are not, they do not respond to the standard. And in Vietnam, we don't have enough the standard to recognize them. And the market is not yet accept the recyclable recycled product. So that's the big issue in the for the economy, circular economy for the plastic industry.
Thank you, sir. Quite informative. Oh, there is another question. Yeah, maybe the last one, because we have to wrap it up.
Yes, thank you. And just to follow up the discussion from Mr. Thi, our partner in Vietnam, and also Saloni from India. So we are from UNDP Vietnam. We have been supporting and following the inclusive waste management and also EPR scheme by, recently we brought a delegation to India to learn about the MIF model, and that is exactly what we are trying to implement this year and next year and early next year in Vietnam. So basically to create a facility, which is, as Mr. Thi mentioned, we will be forming like an organization. There will be a system, an entity for the facility, and where we can engage informal workers, informal waste worker, who is actually collecting and picking the waste from the environment and from household and bring to the facilities. And finally, that facility can have access to the EPR fund, from which in Vietnam we already collected some. So linking between both the policy part and also from the grassroots level. So just want to share that part, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for.
So thanks. So maybe it's more of a reflection. So we learned this today that we need indeed that manufacturers as well as waste operators report into a system to be able to control the EPR system. So we also learned that there are several ways to do that. So there are sticks, but also carrots ways to do that. So we learned from India that there are incentives for the informal waste pickers, for instance, they're reporting to the system. We learned from the Philippines that there are incentives for the manufacturer, or tax breaks for the manufacturers to report into the system. But we also know from the experience of Europe, for instance, that there is also a stick system. So to link the permit to operate with the option to report into the system. So my question, and maybe I would like to pose this question to Wayne, because I know that he's very well experienced with EPR. What do you think is the best approach for countries that are initiating their EPR implementation to oblige the operators, the waste operators or the manufacturer to report into the system? More of a stick or more of a carrot approach, a mix of both? What would be your suggestion, let's say, to the countries that are present here and they want to move on with this monitoring? Thanks.
Well, I think that's a tricky question. It depends also how the industry reacts, how positive they are in order to introduce this new EPR. If they are part of the development of the system, then I think it might be enough with the carrots. But if they are against introducing the system, or maybe hesitant, perhaps you would need to use more of sticks. So it depends on the situation, and I think it's a little bit different in different countries. It used to be.
Thanks, Wayne. No more raised hands. I think it's time to wrap it up. I'd like to share my opinion on this workshop, the first day of the workshop. We heard about different systems in the countries from the region. My expectations were that every country has EPR in its agenda, and I'm quite happy that my expectations were actually true. We heard that most of the countries they have already legislation in place, especially Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia. Sorry if I will miss one or two, but I'd like to say that I was quite impressed by the Indian system. Actually, I follow it in the beginning. There were several options. Finally, this option with the certificates was chosen, which reminds us of UK system. But actually, I would say much better than UK than what it was, because all these issues that were present there, I think there is a solution found in India, because I saw there quite impressive information system envisaged, also third-party auditing, also taking care about free riders. So all possible leaks, I think they are covered. But we will further investigate, and we will be grateful, sir, if you provide us with the information, because we are preparing a report about the countries in the region. So maybe we'll contact you and other advanced systems in the region that could be used as an example to the rest, so that the Asian Pacific region becomes more greener, and finally this garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean to start to reduce, not to grow. I'd like to share my opinion also. I'm quite happy that you pay attention, especially on the topics that I was concerned. We saw that in Sri Lanka, in Indonesia, and all other presenters that presented their system, the elements that I was concerned about controlling the free riders, about tracking, verifying the reported data, whether targets are achieved or not achieved, auditing systems. All the countries are aware of these problems, and measures are taken to solve them. Also, I am quite happy that the basic services, basic waste management services are actually identified as very important to serve as a foundation. Also, I was quite impressed by this project in the Maldives and the 6 island nations. Yes, when we establish a system for the first time, we need data. And this approach, using data about products, data from customs, this is the best approach to identify the quantity, to just get a rough idea what could be expected in order to know the dimensions of the future EPR system that should be built, the capacities of the sorting plants, the capacities of the recycling plants, also the number, the volume of the containers. So we need to calculate all this. We need initial data, and this is the right approach, using data from the customs, from statistics, from associations of producers. You also mentioned that you use data from Coca-Cola. Yeah. So this is the right approach for initial calculation of the data. We also applied this in Bulgaria when we first established our APR system. So that's it from my side. And I think we could wrap it up. And
well, first of all, I wanted to thank you all the panelists for giving and sharing all the interesting information from your different countries situation. I think it was extremely useful and also valuable for all participants in the room. Then I have just one thing to add. Taking into the experience we gained from Europe, we dealt with the EPR now in 30 years. I would say that you are in for a long journey. It's going to take time. Be prepared. Be prepared, I think, in order to change, in order to adjust, and perhaps also kill some of your darlings because things would change and you don't know exactly how it would look like in 10 years from now. Thank you.